First of all, thanks for showing up after yesterday's party, and thanks to Polyconf crew for this opportunity and great conference so far. So this talk is called Exploring the Universal Library. I am Szymon Kaliski, and you can find me at trizmofdemos.com, Szymon K, a few places on the internet. So first of all, I'll be talking about a bunch of seemingly unrelated things, a little bit hand-wavy and esoteric ones, so just bear with me for a while. First of all, most of the thoughts I'll be presenting then are stolen, but so are thoughts in your heads, and we steal them from people smarter than us, from books and movies. So I just wanted to straight up point out some of the inspirations for this talk. Carsten Schmidt, who is amazing artist working in code, Devin Lunin Vega, who is independent game developer, Marcin Ignatz, who does amazing things with data, and Jorge Luis Borges and his short stories, and there are many, many others. So a few words about me. I'm a freelancer. I tend to only work on projects that really interest me, so the tech is not really that important. The actual thing I'm doing is important to me. So what I do is, usually when people ask me, I tell them I'm a creative technologist, but I really don't like this term because I don't feel that creative most of the time, and also it means somehow that other technology is not creative, which I don't agree with. So I just put this technology in strange places. So most of this talk is going to be about my experiences and how I'm framing, or trying to think about what I do. So let's start with the term of universal library. So it was a very short story by Kurt Laswitz, which inspired Jorge Luis Borges to write his infamous Library of Babel. Has anyone heard of Library of Babel? Great, amazing. So for those who hasn't, this is a very short story about infinite library containing infinite number of books with all the possible permutations of letters in English language. So you'll find there a complete set of Shakespeare works and your life story up to this point right now listening to me and until you die, but you'll also find complete garbage, books filled with letter A, and books letter filled with only the punctuation in all the possible permutations of those letters. So there are librarians exploring this place, and at some point they come with the idea to start destroying books which make no sense in hopes to leave the library with only the books that produce a value. But then it takes a long time because the library is infinite. So at some point language evolves and they come to the conclusion that maybe some of the books they destroyed actually right now are really important. But then again, there's infinite number of very similar books differing by just the word somewhere, so I wouldn't be that scared. But anyways, language is extremely inspiring to me, and I'm talking here not only as a language, as a spoken language, or as a programming language per se, but language as a way to shape your thoughts, and language as a tool, really. So yesterday we've heard about linguistic determinism, and this is something I want to touch about as well. So this has, the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis has been disproven by now, the strong one, at least the one that tells you that you can think things for which you have no thoughts, but it's still a really powerful concept to me. And there's also this quote from Wittgenstein that the limits of my language are the limits of my world. And this is, so try to keep that in mind throughout my talk. And there's also a biblical story of Babel where people started building tower into the heavens, and God didn't like that really, so he created a lot of different languages for them so they couldn't communicate. But having all of that in mind, I would say more languages would give you more tools to work creatively and build up the tower even quicker, so I don't really get that one, but yeah, let's explore some languages. So let's start with matter. Right now we have CNC milling and 3D printing, and we can produce real physical forms inside of computer, but we really lack the proper abstractions and ways of thinking about that. And also, I'm pretty sure at some point we'll have some kind of atomic assembler, like working with single atoms, but I'm pretty sure none of us want to work with that, and we want proper ways to think about shapes. So here's an extremely short demo. I'm playing around with Carsten Schmidt's Think library for Clojure, and I'm just playing around with shapes, but as you can see, I never have to think about where the single vertices go, where all the points that build up triangle are. I'm starting with a circle and sampling it 3 times, thus getting a triangle, then extruding it, building a 3D form, this is really important and really powerful idea where we think about building up things in terms of pipeline of transformations on shapes instead of just where each of the points goes. So I really wanted to shout out to Carsten Schmidt and go check out thi.ng. This is an extremely powerful set of libraries for Clojure and Clojure script. So if you know this already, just try it out. And Azure has been doing with this idea, it's not necessarily new or my per se, but of growing those forms semi-organically. So this is a shape that's growing out using these tools similarly to how Algae grows in Ocean. And then with my often collaborator, Marek Straszak, we 3D print them. I have one with me, really small, so if you want to look at it, just go grab me afterwards. We plan on scanning some spaces in 3D, growing those on those spaces digitally and printing them back again, so we can very fluidly move between those spaces. And this is really interesting, and I think there will be more of that, so we need proper ways of thinking about that and shaping our ways of working with this kind of stuff. So yeah, let's look at different language for data, and still language as a way of shaping our thoughts and not necessarily programming or spoken language. So data is everywhere, I'm sure you all know that, but it can be more than a table, and there are some really interesting things you can get out of data if you look for unusual places or look at it in strange ways. So these few slides are a little bit like preaching to the choir, but I'm pretty sure you all know that you can think of your code as a data set. And sorry, this is a term coming from Lisp, which is homoiconicity, where you express your code the same way you express your data. And this is really interesting when it comes to as expressions, because it puts you in a mindset that when writing code or describing data set, you really have the same set of tools. So this is really, really interesting thing that puts you in a proper perspective. And in other languages, I'm not saying that ASTs and as expressions are the same or similar. I'm just saying that you always have this plane that you can get to that lets you work with code in terms of data. And you can use that not only when you write compilers or macros. I, for example, have been playing with GLSL shaders for a while, and I really like to be able to interact with the things I'm making, but to control something that's happening on GPU, you need to expose a variable usually called uniform, and then bind to it from outside. So if you want to quickly create some part of UI that you want to control a variable inside of your shader, you need to get back to JavaScript, or in this term, at least, write the UI, do the piping, go back, and then you can use it. But then if you want to change it, you need to repeat it and repeat it again. And this is really long feedback loop, and I really hate that when working with fluid systems and quick systems. So I wrote a very small library, like 50 lines of code, so it analyzes the shader AST and grabs all the uniforms that start with the UI, and then draws appropriate UI based on the type of that uniform. So for vector 2, I have 2 sliders. For vector 3, I have 3 sliders, and so on. So this has been really, really interesting to me to look at and understand that you can always get a step back and look from broader perspective, even of simpler things like that. Moving on, we have relations in data, and I have been really, really inspired by graphs. And one of my oldest experiments has been to use graphs in here to describe musical notation. So this is actually a thing that makes sounds. If you go to the proper website, you build up this graph of connections. Little green dots start walking around. When they hit the big one, they make a sound. Sound is connected to where the big dot is placed on. So this is a graph you build up visually, but you think in terms of composition. So this has been really interesting to me. And just like a side word, I'm not saying these are the ways to solve any kind of problems. I'm just trying to show you that there are ways in which you can look at data sets or actually anything from different perspectives and get something interesting out of that. One of the things I worked on as a first project that actually someone paid me for has been an interactive movie. So one where you watch some scenes, and after one of them ends, you can choose if the hero should take left or right, talk to someone or not. And when we started working on this project, the crew filmmakers told me that there's only going to be like 5 or 7 scenes and maybe 2 alternative endings. But I really didn't want to hard code anything, so I made them this this simple tool where you can grab the images and videos, connect them together, and it produces a JSON output that then the front end lives on. But once they started playing with this actually, they ended up with this. And this has been extremely interesting to me to see how a tool we made at the beginning of the project actually shaped our little language inside of that project to think about what we are doing and changed it. So it's really crucial to be able to think about these things. And yeah, graphs can also be used for computations. And have any of you actually used some kind of visual programming languages like MaxMSP or PureData, VVVV? Okay, so go check it out. You are not really a polyglot if you only work in text. This is a simple tool I'm working on for Helmut Lobby, where it's aimed at musicians. You plug in your MIDI controller into your computer, process the MIDI data before it hits your music making software, but it also can output to Arduinos or other computers throughout like OSC or WebSockets or whatever. So it's like a way to pipeline transformations on data. And it's not really a programming language. It's not Turing complete for sure. Maybe it's a small DSL. I'm not exactly sure. The thing here is you can look at these things from different perspective, and this gives musicians language to work with this kind of computations, which for us are really simple, but for them are something totally new. We also need language for art, and don't get me wrong, this is an art with a small a, because there's a whole universe of amazing artists doing deep and powerful works in terms of computers, and in here I'm only going to talk about what I do, which are just usually things that are just not needed. So for me, when you work with art in terms of computers really need some kind of fabric. And interaction is a simple one, but you still can get interesting things out of that. Here's just a small screen cap from a project I worked with Marek Staszak, my collaborator, where we created this deconstructed platonic solids out of steel, and we put little solenoids, which are motors that hit things on top of them with little Arduinos and Bluetooth connections. And I wrote this simple UI that was running on a touch screen in a gallery where you could play, like compose very simple musical, not even structures that hit the things and make sounds. And the interesting thing for me has been this is all running in the terms of like art festival and a gallery. I'm pretty sure all of the people that played with that actually have computers at home, but also I'm pretty sure most of them never made music with a computer, and here they did, just because it was approachable or different or simple. And that's why interactions are interesting, because shaping things in different way can really make people do things they usually wouldn't do. But you can also grab these interactions much deeper from your body right now. I helped my friend Rafał Zapała to work on his Sensorium project, where he made a beautiful musical score. He's a proper musician. And when you are part of this installation, you sit, there's an EEG helmet on your head. We also monitor your pulse and galvanic skin response. And the score starts, and we monitor how your body reacts to that, and this influences the score. So you end up in this strange biofeedback loop of listening to your own emotions throughout the lens of the software and hardware running on your body. So the interesting thing here is there are consumer-grade EEG systems that you can buy. They are really cheap, around the price of Kinect, and you can play with them at home. So last thing when it comes to fabrics, there's data also, and there's even a term called data art, which is data visualization you can't read back. It just looks nice. I had the pleasure to work with Marcin Ignatz and Henry Wolik last year for Google I/O, where we made this data art based on all the Android devices throughout the world. It was running on 27K screen, so extremely huge. It's all running with JavaScript, and a lot of, like, all the heavy logic is done on shaders. And this is actually a set of PNGs we exported because it couldn't run live, but still pretty fun to work with. And But we started the project with actually making tools to see how the data looks like and to build our own little language in terms of that project, what colors mean, what space mean, how we can move them in terms of what we get from Google, which is a lot, so you could be scared. And here are some pretty graphs that never made it to the final version. And another shout out, if you're bored with Three.js, go check out pex.gl. This is Marcin's library. I help very, very little, and he's doing amazing things with that, so go check it out. And last thing, I don't really have a lot of time to explore this space, but you can use algorithms as fabric for making art, and especially with the current developments in neural networks. But I think it poses some interesting ethical questions, like you're not, as an artist, you're not really building artworks, you're building artists that make the artworks, you are changed into a curator. And I'm not really sure if you can sell those. And I can also imagine people collecting artists instead of like those algorithms and not caring about their outputs really. I really wanted to talk a little bit about that, but then 2 days ago, PBS Idea channel released this video, so just go check it out. The guy talks for 15 minutes about all the ethical standpoints of making arts with artificial intelligence. So make a picture if you want to find it afterwards. And yeah, we're moving to last things, language for tools, so shaping our ways of thinking with tools. And there's this powerful quote by Marshall McLuhan, who's a media theorist, who said that first we shape our tools, then they shape us. And this has been, I think, mostly true when it comes to anything. And there's a little backstory to that. When I started doing my own work, I made my own time tracking tool to actually know how much time I spent on what. I would put in all the hours I spent on a given project and also how much money I made. And then like the focal point of all of that became this huge table sorted by how much I made per hour on a given project. So all my personal ones would fall down to the bottom, and I still knew they were there, and I still wanted to do them, but subconsciously, I started thinking about them as providing no value at all. And in the end of 2015, actually, for half a year, I stopped doing any personal work, and I ended up in a pretty bad place emotionally because of that. And only after watching the Vinlu in Vegas Frameworks for Mystic, amazing talk, when he talks about his own time tracking system, I actually understood that at some point the machine stopped working for me, and I started working for it. And it has been a really strange feeling to know that I ended up in this place because of something I made that should help myself. So what could I do? I built a new one, and I tried to be more understanding of this problem, and I tried to shape it in a way that makes me think about how I want to spend my time and what I want to do with my life. So here you can see this is by weeks, and I know these graphs are not nice. They don't need to be. They are not for a client. They are just for me. They need to send me a message. You can see the part where I stopped doing any work at all, and this has been really bad. And this things when I started doing anything was actually when I started working on this, and then on other things as well. But I still work more and more, and this is not nice. But this is the most important thing in this tool, and something I try to look at least once a day. The squares represent all of the days throughout the year, and I put a little red bar on top if I worked on a work project, and a blue bar if I work on personal one. So I can see where I spend my time and how much I can do, and you can see that in 2016 I already spent more days working on personal things than in 2015 and 14. So this is really great for me. And also once I start this chain, it's really hard to break it if you see it growing. So this is really interesting. But also, on the other hand, it goes down for the next 30 years or so. So as much as I could hope to get. And this really puts me in the mindset to think about my future and show me the time passing. And this is a really powerful concept. So I encourage you to take some time off and build your own time tracking thing. There's something poetic in that, I think. So to finish off, I'm a little bit quick. I think I already, yeah, sorry. So we talked about language and tools and thinking and making, and there's a lot of feedback loops and ways they influence each other. And it's really hard to think about that in a way, but then you have to, because they shape the way you look at things and the way you make things. So just try to be conscious about this. And there's also a lot to figure out and explore, and I wanted to show you some of the strange ways I look at things and to encourage you to try to do the same. And as Jenna told you yesterday, just find other language and bring something back to yours, but also play with something totally unrelated, because you never know what will spark a new idea. And I really believe you can only think about some kind of meta patterns if you know the spectrum, right? Because you can't focus on just this one little thing and expect to be creative and build up new things from just this one point. So that's it for me. I'm a little bit short on, like, quick, but yeah, thanks for listening.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions?
So that was amazing. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
How do you maintain creativity in the face of tools that can sometimes occupy your mind with, like, you lose your original idea and you go off onto the side? Do you have any ideas there?
That's really hard, and especially when making something creative or interactive or visual, musical with computers. When you are an artist working, for example, a painter, right? You hold the brush and you see what you are making. In here, you always translate throughout some things, and right now we have, like, the pipeline is getting bigger and bigger. So yeah, it's really hard. That's why I love short feedback loops. That's why I try to build tools that make it extremely quick, but it's still not ideal, and I'm pretty sure it will never be. So when it comes to creativity, as I mentioned in the beginning, I don't really feel day-to-day that creative. I just try to push up. There's sometimes, like, a little thing I'm interested in, so I just try to force myself to push at that for as long as possible. Yeah.
Yeah, I was just wondering what's in your slide here. The picture behind you.
This is an Escher's painting. So this is like a library thing I found.
So you mentioned how this bad time tracking brought you down. Are there any other, like, major traps on a sort of the creativity path that you highlight?
No idea. I don't know. I just, like, it took me half a year to understand that I was doing something wrong to myself. So I really don't know, honestly. I would love to help, but I have no idea. I'm just like, I'm struggling usually to try to make something. So yeah, just bear with it for a while. I think I don't know.
So let me know. I thought the talk was really amazing.
Thank you.
Let me know if it's too personal to ask, but I saw on the time tracking sheet that you don't seem to have any weekends. So is that something you consciously do, or?
Yeah, I hate that, but I try to spend weekends. I have more time to work on my own personal things, but usually a little bit of work just kind of flows in there with it. So yeah, I try to be more, like, schedule the time better, but I also found out that you can really keep on going if you switch the spaces. If you work just on one project for a very long time, it gets worse and worse. But if you switch then to something totally different, like, there are parts of your brain that haven't been working and they switch on and you can still produce, but I wouldn't encourage anyone to do that, and just, like, get the time off. Don't be me. I wasn't expecting so many questions, so thanks, guys. It's amazing.
And once you work, do you work the full days, or do you work, for example, 4 hours one day, then 8 hours the other? How is that organized?
Oh, I just push up for as long as I can. I know it usually starts with the client projects because they pay, and then after I'm done, I really have this urge to do something for myself or to work on something that I'm not paid for, because I get only on projects that really interest me, so I still don't feel like I'm doing something only for the money. I'm also interested in that thing, but there's also I think I found a value in doing something for no money at all, just for yourself. So I really try, after I finish with that, take a little bit break and then start working on the thing that I want to do. So yeah, usually my day just ends up really late, sadly. Yeah, there's no, like, silver lining or great solution. Sorry.
Thank you for your talk. How did
Thanks.
you come to work on this kind of project? What's your background? Did you start with, did you study art? Did you study programming? Did you work as a normal programmer before? Or?
I did computer science for 5 years, but I really played music throughout the time. So I started doing live visualization I actually made music with computers, of course. So I ended up doing a lot of Max MSP and doing like transformations of audio signals before we even touched on that in the computer science curriculum. So I really hated the studies, to be honest. And for me, it's a little bit painful because right now I found out things that are really interesting right now that they were trying to teach me like 5 years back, but I wasn't paying that much attention. So yeah, I came through that spectrum of making things move and sound nice instead of focusing on what's the tool and underlying thing is for that. I'm not sure if that's answering the question. Yeah.
Last row.
Sorry, where? Oh yeah.
Are you usually working alone, or because this creative programming, I call it, or developing, is totally unrelated to what I do? So are you working alone or partnering up with some team?
Usually most of the projects here are just like little experiments I run. So I work on them alone. For clients, it's usually also me alone. Very rarely, it's an extremely small team, like 2-3 people. Yeah, it's hard, I think, like to find people doing that and also find the scope of project that's big enough for a lot of people to collaborate on things. And then, yeah, I never hit this problem or actually working with multiple people.
Hello, I really enjoyed your talk, like
Thank
everyone
you.
else. My question was about Max MSP. Have you come across any other visual development environments outside of the domain of music? Because I've been looking around for ages and I'm really struggling to find ones beyond like apparatus. Or things like that.
There are visual ones, right? There's VVVV and Quartz Composer, which is bundled with Mac. You can always build up your own. It's not really that hard. Like you need only the logic to put up things and connect them with lines, and there everything else is the spec. You like decide what runs inside the thing, and actually there's a whole space you can explore. There's also the project called NoFlow, I think, which tries to have JavaScript running in this like kind of nodes, but I'm not sure where they stand right now. I think it was NoFlow, NoFlow. They had a Kickstarter campaign at some point, but I'm really not sure where they are at right now. But I find them, it's not really a solution to generic programming problems, I think, and even Max MSP, if you build up something big, it gets really complicated to work with. But then for small things like the little like micro DSLs for very specific things, it works pretty well.
Okay, thank you very much for
Cheers,
presenting.
thanks.